Navayauvana. Hi, my friend. Hey, I really enjoyed lesson number 6. I wish you had put something on the front that said, warning contains humor. I was drinking my coffee and Angel walked in the room and she said, Nava's got the 6th lesson up. Why don't you put it on? So I went, oh, sure. Sitting in my bark lounger, sipping on my coffee. Go, click. Then you start with the joke. And at first it's like, we have this interesting new thing, this incredible device. I'm going, what could he have gotten? This Craig synthesizer? When you get a Moog synthesizer or a Kurzweil keyboard? Or and then you said, the intervalometer, and at this point it was just like right out of Hollywood. Spit take all over my computer, just coffee everywhere. So we stopped it and cleaned up. So beware. Great class, and I'm very honored. And I would like to say right now, thank you to all your classmates for the thank you. That deeply touched me. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. It's nice to know what's happening across the world is just like being in each other's home, and that everyone can look in on this and see what's happening. So today, the subject is flute. And I noticed that you guys are making flutes out of PCV pipe. I'd like to introduce my flute. 1966, when I first came to San Francisco, I think 3 days after I was here, we had an earthquake. It was my first growing up in New York and Chicago. Never had an earthquake. It was quite exciting. And the next day, my friends said, we're going to take you out to see the Golden Gate Bridge. So as we were going through Golden Gate Park, walking through the Haight-Ashbury on the north side of the park, we were walking out there. One of my friends, Stanley Bear, said, look, we got this new little pill that you can take, and it'll give you a little high and it'll be exciting. Okay, fine. So he gives me this little purple pill, and turned out to be, his first name turned out to be Osley, and it turned out to be Osley Bear Stanley, who was the guy who made a lot of LSD here in the Haight-Ashbury, and the next thing I knew, I was starting to hallucinate. So as I'm hallucinating my way through the park, I noticed that we get to this little area where there's this beautiful little pond, and then there's this little Greek pillars off in one side, and right out of the exact center of the pond is growing these beautiful pieces of bamboo. And I just said, hey guys, let me sit here and chill for a while. And I just sat there in the peaceful water and the beautiful little Greek things in the back, and the bamboo blowing in the wind. I mean, it was just gorgeous. And then all of a sudden I saw, growing right out of the middle, this one piece of bamboo that sort of said, hey Nance, come here. And I asked my friends, how deep is the pond? And they said, it's only waist deep. So I went wading out into the pond, and I grabbed that piece of bamboo and I plucked it out by its roots, and I used that to walk with all the way out to the park when we went to see the Golden Gate Bridge. Later, I came back here, and the next day when my head straightened out and I kind of got rearranged, I suddenly noticed leaning up against the wall this piece of bamboo that I had pulled out of the park, and I thought, oh my God, did I commit a crime or what? I don't know. But then suddenly I remembered that there is here on Octavia a Zen center, and my friend Alan Watts at that time, who I had known and met in Chicago as a young boy and studied Zen with, one of the reasons I came out here in the first place, was at the Zen Center, and I knew that there was a great Japanese Zen flute maker. So I thought, okay, I'll take my little piece of bamboo with me, and ran off to the monastery and said, prostrated myself and introduced myself, and Alan introduced us, and I said, look, I got this piece of bamboo out of the Stowe Lake, and I don't want it to go to waste. I don't want it to dry up and die. It talked to me. I think it needs to sing. well, he sat me down and he said, well, you picked it, you make it. And he put a hot poker in this fire. And he got this, like, you know, like the kind of pokers you use for fireplaces, except this little hot rod. And he took it and inside. And there are 3 joints. He cut it a little bit longer than one joint on this side, and right about at the joint here, making sure that there were 3 joints. And he explained to me that the interesting thing about bamboo is that in good weather, bamboo will grow and the joints will be fairly evenly spaced. And that traditionally Japanese flute makers have always looked for a piece of bamboo that had great symmetry or good bones or lines in it. And he said I had done a good job of picking a good piece. And that what happens is they're going to use these joints here as a way to build a flute. We cut it off at this first joint, and then right here we knocked out these 2 joints with the hot poker, so air can flow through here, but we left this one in, that side in. He said, okay, the next thing you have to do is measure the flute, and I said, well, how are we going to do that? Should I do it in inches or centimeters? And he said, no, you're going to do it with this stuff, piece of string. And what he did is he pulled out a piece of string. Let me get one. And we took this piece of string, and you put one end of the piece of string right here where the closed joint is at, and you pull the string down all the way to the other end of the flute, so the string is the full length of the pipe that you're using. So if you have PCV pipe and you've stuck a cork in there, wherever it's closed off, it would be from the inside closed off point all the way on down. Now with a piece of PCV pipe, once you put the cork in there, even before you put any holes, you can, you know, you can play it this way to get a sound out of that, and you can pretty much tell what the pitch is. And you can cut it until you get a pitch standard close to what you want. Then what you do is, after you measure this, he said the first thing that we're going to do is take the string and divide the string exactly in half. And what you do is you take this part here that you folded and you put that at that spot and you pull it down, and you will see the first hole that we put in is 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th hole, not the 6th hole, but the 5th hole on the flute, as you'll see to the very center, is exactly 1/2 of the length of the open flute. 1/2. The next secret was to just simply put this hole at this joint, because the next division is 1/3. So after this hole, which is the half the length of the flute, is inserted, we have to put a hole at 1/3. And this is where the joints come in handy. Since they grow at about the same distance, and this is where we're cutting it off, then about as much overlap as I have here, I would put a hole right there by that joint and know that that's 1/3 of the distance, that's 1/3, and there is 1/3. So that hole's at 1/3. Now what you would do with the string, of course, is you would simply take the 2 ends of the string and you would fold them like this and pull until you fold the string exactly in thirds. And now when the string is folded into thirds, you can take and place it, and you will see that from here, when it's nicely stretched out, it goes right to the bottom. So this hole is placed at 1/3 the distance from the bottom. So we've got this hole, half the distance, and this hole is 1/3 the distance. Now what you do is you take your string, and you tie a knot in the string. And I have to do this a couple times. Tie a knot in the string, and then what we do is we take that knot this is a pretty thin piece of string. You get this knot to align with the very center of that hole there. So let's use this right there in the very center of that hole, and you pull the string tautly and you find this very center of that hole there. So the two holes you have from the center of the hole that's half and from the center of the hole that's 1/3 the length of the flute, that distance from here to that first knot there now becomes my yardstick. And what we do is we take that and again we divide that exactly in half. And we take that half and put it right in the very center of that half hole, and we pull one side over here and we pull the other over here, so equidistant on either side of this hole. With this in the very center, we'll have, you'll see the little, I don't know if you can see, but my little knot is right in the center of that hole, and my other position would be right here in the center of that hole, and the distance from this hole to that hole is this guy exactly in the center, and it happens to be the same distance as from here to here. Then we take that same measurement and we take this hole now and we put that center in the center of that hole, and you will see it gives us the hole below the 1/3 hole, right to the center. And then what we do is take the 1/3 hole, put the knot in the center of that, and you will see it gives us the bottom hole. And that is how you get the holes for a flute. The next thing is the blowhole. The blowhole should be placed at exactly 1/7. So again, you can take a piece of string and you can fold it, and fold it, and fold it. So if the both ends come out on the same side, that's not 7. If you fold it into 7ths just properly, what will happen is this string will come out at this end if these things are exactly at 1/7. And then you can measure from here down to here to put your hole at 1/7 the length of the flute. Now the reason they put the hole on 1/7 is because that suppresses the 7th overtone. If I put the hole and blow into the hole where the 7th overtone note is at, I essentially am damping that. But the wave is going to be like this, right? It's going to be, the wave's curved. This is one node and this is the note at the 7th. If I want to really suppress that, I want to get the height of that wave, which means that I would take that 1/7, divide it into 1/2, and put the blowhole exactly there. So the center of this hole ideally should be 1/14, 2/7 or 1/14. At 1/14, it will be right on the crest of the 7th overtone and essentially dampen it. And then you'll get a mellower sounding flute. Now technically, anywhere from the length of 1/7 to the very end, you can put the hole. It'll work. It will not change the pitch of the thing at all, and it won't affect the rest of the tuning. But it will, where you put this hole, will totally change the tone. Another thing that creates beautiful tone on a flute, with a bamboo flute like this, sticking a hot poker in here, and then using the hot poker, and I don't know if you'll notice, but if you look on the edges of my hole, you'll see they're blackened. And that is because I did not use a drill to drill them. This was done with a hot poker that was just seared in. And these holes were seared open, which is one of the interesting things you can do with bamboo. It basically, if you have a red hot poker, it melts out of the way. And you stinks like crazy. Just sear the hole. Now, how big's the hole? Well, it turns out that if we take, I'm going to use my Recognize that? The magical tool that no one can build, the intervalometer. You'll notice that the distances on these, of course, are 1/12 the octave. If I take two of these, it just so happens on my bamboo flute that the diameter of my flute, if you will take a look, is exactly from this edge to that edge, right there, or 2 divisions. The holes should be 1/2 the diameter. So whatever the inside diameter of the flute is, you want this hole, the holes that you drilled first, particularly, to be 1/2 the diameter. That effectively makes the hole size 1/4 of the surface area. Anything from 1/4 of the surface area to completely open, the flute considers it being cut off. If I had this hole here and it was 1/2 the diameter, it would sound the same if I cut it off completely. Same pitch. So 1/2 the diameter of the pipe is enough for the hole to be considered infinitely open. And if we take a look, you will see here that the holes, this hole is exactly, I don't know if you can see that, this hole is exactly 1/2 the diameter. The diameter of the pipe, you see, is 2 of those divisions. One of those divisions is the width of the hole. The next hole, same. 1/2 the diameter of the inside diameter. Same, 1/2. This hole, 1/2. Now these two holes, funny thing. If you make this hole the same size as I have done here, then this hole here has to be a little bit smaller. And what happens is you get a diatonic flute that as you're going up, this is do, re, mi, fa, right? Sa, da, ga. So when we go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, I have to move this hand this way to get the right pitch. However, if you make this hole the same as these holes and make this hole, remember at the third, smaller. So right from the beginning of building a flute, you'd have to know this would be a little bit tinier, and then what you do is you can drill it out until it's in pitch. What will happen is you get something like, and here is one made of cane that's almost the same size. You'll see that the holes are spaced approximately the same. And what's happened here is, in this one, they've made all these holes exactly the same size and that one smaller. And what I did is I made all these holes the same size and that one smaller. The difference is this one hole, the third, being smaller, I can then play going straight up, and that going from 1, 2, 3 to 4, I don't have to cross over like this to flatten the hole. The hole is small enough that it can be in pitch. So on this flute, I have to do this. Now the reason that I did that is that fingering pattern happens to be the 6-hole fingering pattern for a metal open flute for the key of D. And the one fingering pattern that's common on all of the woodwinds, including a saxophone, tenor sax, alto sax, baritone saxophone, soprano saxophone, clarinet. If you take the 6 holes on the clarinet, usually on a saxophone you'll notice that there's little pearl inlays on 6 of the holes. Those are the pearl inlays that represent the 6 holes on the bamboo flute. And if you play do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that will work on a saxophone. You might be in a different key depending on the key, the length of the sax, but that fingering pattern, that D fingering pattern on the normal C flute is the universal fingering pattern for all woodwinds. So no matter what woodwind you want to pick up, Also on the recorder, I can pick up the recorder, and instead of starting with the bottom hole, leave the bottom hole open, use that D fingering and play a major scale on the recorder. You can do it on a fipple flute, you can do it on a concert, on a ocarina. You can play that fingering on an ocarina. It becomes a universal fingering. But you'll see here, if we adapt the holes, make this hole smaller when we're cutting the third, so we can open it up later, make all the other holes the same size, then the flute acts this way. Right? Okay. So, the other thing is, to get a really good tone out of the flute, the smoothness and the cleanliness of the inside is important. Now in a bamboo flute, I actually took a piece of sandpaper and wrapped it around a stick, around a sponge, so it would push out, stuck it in here, and then it went to the joint area and just came over here to the joint area. And then when I got those joints fairly widened, then I tried to sandpaper the whole inside somewhat smooth, but with bamboo, because it's very grainy, you can't do that much. However, in the country you're at, often people use cane. And instead of using bamboo, they use cane. And the nice thing about cane is cane grows very, very smooth inside. The grain follows the growth pattern rather than crossing. And so when you get something like this made out of cane, you can easily go inside there with a piece of sandpaper and the more silvery, slick, smooth you make the inside, the better the tone is going to be. Also on a regular metal flute, if people don't clean their flute on a regular basis and it gets gummed up inside a little bit, little pieces of bubble gum or food or stuff get caught inside, the tone will suffer. So someone who takes their flute apart and cleans it religiously every time is going to have a much, much better tone. And if you can have the inside chrome plated or smoothed some way, send it to a machine shop and have them use emery cloth and oil to buffer the inside of your flute so it's glass-like or mirror-like surface, you're going to get a gorgeous, gorgeous tone out of that flute. So that is my lesson. To sum it up, the hole is 1/14. On this particular flute, there's a cork in there, and the cork comes right to about here. So from here to here is the length that will produce whatever tone or pitch standard we want. The hole is punched, you find 1/7, cut the 7th in half so you have 1/14, and place the hole there or close this way towards the close spot. The hole here will be a little bit larger than these. Some people like a oblong hole. On my flute, I actually took the time here, I don't know if you can see, but I made a teardrop shape and then cut this square and then took a file and went in there and underfiled it so that comes to, instead of being a thick piece of wood with a hole going through it, it's actually tapered like this, like a whistle, like the edge of a recorder. And what happens is it gives me a tighter edge. I did make a mistake, and it's thicker on one side than the other, and it gave me one bad note in the higher octave. So 1/14. Cut the string in half, gives you this hole. That hole should be approximately 1/2 the diameter of the inside diameter of the piece of pipe you're using. If it's a big piece of pipe, 1/2 that diameter. If it's a skinny little piece of pipe, 1/2 that diameter is what that hole size should be. This hole, if you want to make a flute that goes straight up diatonically, make it smaller than that, and you can ream it out into pitch later. Make it quite a bit, it's about 30% smaller. You'll notice that hole's tiny. Make it about 30%. Then this is 1/3 the length of the flute. This is 1/2. You take the distance between those two and you center, the exact center of that on either side of that hole, and that gives you these two holes. You then take this end of it, using a protractor, works really well, and you'll find that from here down to there will give you the hole underneath, and then from this hole at the third down to that hole will give you that. Now some people like to put the holes in a straight line. If you draw a line around here, it really doesn't matter. What I like to do is I push this forward and this back so it would fit my hand. You see the short finger, the long finger, so I made that, instead of in a straight line, I wanted it to fit the tips or the pads of my hand. And then up here, you usually are doing it this way, so you're bringing these fingers right down like that in a straight line. And so these up here are usually in a straight line. But I've seen people who don't play with this technique, they tend to put the hand this way, and what they do is they'll pull this hole slightly this way and that hole slightly that way. So only these holes will be centered. This will be pushed forward and this will be pushed back towards me a little bit, so the hand. So you just put the holes where your hand fits. Okay? That's pretty much it for making diatonic flutes. Alright? Opening the holes a little bit, always keep the holes undersized, play the flute, if you've got a meter, check it, and then open the holes up until you get the sound that you want and it's in pitch. You also have to learn to get an embouchure to get things in pitch, so it's not going to be dead on, and there's no, honest to God, there's no real science here to get it perfect. Anyway, any science that you use, any math that you use, it's going to lead you somewhat astray, and you're going to wind up either carving the hole oblong one way or the other. But piece of string cut in half, 1/3, the distance between the half hole and the 1/3 hole become the holes on either side, aligning with that bottom hole to find that hole, and with the third hole to find that hole. Done. Make all the holes except this one exactly half the diameter of the inside diameter, or make all these holes the same size and make this one about 30% less, and just listen to get that tuning right. 1/14 of the distance to suppress the 7th overtone, to have less tension in the tone and mellow it out. Sand the inside as smoothly as possible. The smoother the inside is, the cleaner the inside is, the mellower, the more beautiful the tone. I hope you guys have an enjoyable time making flutes. I have one small caveat to this. I'm going to explain how to play these things in a little while on my next video, but the caveat is, in 1966, I made that flute. I played that flute for 15 years everywhere I went. I carried it with me every place I went. And this flute has actually, I've had to use it as a weapon several times. And it's a club that you can carry around to protect yourself that the police will not arrest you for. And so I have broken, I don't know that you can see, but I have actually cracked the flute completely in half, and it fell apart into 2 pieces. And I had to bondo it back together. I've also cracked the flute here and here. Here it cracked 1/2. Here these cracks came from weathering, but mostly from protecting myself, and it was the flute or my life. And I took it to a person that I know who does wonderful woodwork, and he filled in with a thing called wood steel, which they use to fix clarinets with, which why it has a slightly different color. And he very beautifully brought this thing back to life for me. It changes pitch with the weather. When it's wet outside, it swells and the pitch drops. When it's dry, it tends to crack open and leak and tends to get airy. That's the beauty of it. And as I played it for some 15 years, me and it bonded and became one. it got to the point where I no longer heard through my ear myself playing the flute. When sound came out of my mouth, it went straight to my heart, straight into my mind. I used to call it direct to brain. I played direct to brain. And I developed a relationship with this. But the caveat is, I have since 1966 gotten several other pieces of bamboo and have tried to make about 10 or 11 flutes, and none of them are as perfect as this one. For some reason the tuning just worked out, everything worked out. I think being with the Zen master, of course, the vibe helped, and having him guide me, and the fact that I was, it was the morning after my drug experience, that my mind was still somewhere in this world and in the nether world, and all of that stuff sort of came together to build this flute, which became uniquely me. This is an extension of my body. This is me. I am this flute. And I'm sure that's the relationship that Krishna has with his